You, I knew there was going to be some shtick. She was going to drag the chair out, something. Okay, so the next panel that we've got is going to deal with another way of applying these kinds of issues and conclusions. And so let me introduce the panelists, and they will join us here. One is Octopizzo, who is the founder and executive director of the Octopizzo Foundation. Come on down, folks. The next is His Excellency Faryad Warawandizi, who's the Minister of Culture of Iraq. And then we have Sherry Weston, who is the Executive Vice President of Global Impact and Philanthropy at the Sesame Workshop. Please join us here, everybody. Nice to see you. So we just talked about bringing the arts to the front line, bringing it to a place where it's really needed. And refugees and dislocated are groups that are especially important in this regard. There are more than 60 million people in the world who are refugees or dislocated. Clearly one of the biggest such problems is in Syria with regard to the conflict there, with millions of displaced. But actually the biggest refugee camp in the world is in Uganda right now. There are serious problems everywhere in the world, and there are many ways to tackle these problems using art and culture. And so what I'd like to do, again, in the kind of rapid-fire conversation approach that we've had thus far, is to talk about how each of your organizations have done that. Let me start with you, Mr. Minister, because you're obviously dealing with these issues on site, directly in the middle of these issues. So how do you see culture as a way of helping the refugees cope with these issues?
Thank you very much. Let me give you a short story. For me, it is very difficult to talk about this issue because myself experienced dislocated twice in my life. Was one in 1974 when I was a very little teenager. I displaced with my family. We were living in a very small town up north, Erbil, the capital of the Iraqi Kurdistan, and we chose exile. During this short period of time, my father got sick and then passed away because we had no any choice to make treatments for him or to go to the physicians. Second time was in 1989. At the same time, up north Iraq, we dislocated too, me and with my family. I'm living in Iraq. You know, the number of the people dislocated is estimated to be 3.4 million. And mostly they displaced from Anbar, Mosul, Salahuddin, these three provinces, and they are living up north in Iraqi Kurdistan. It is very difficult when we talk about how we defeat the extremism and fundamentalism or Daesh, ISIS, because the only tool that we use now is militarily, and we cannot do the job completely only with military action, because the second package, which in my point of view is the most important one, is how we deal with this issue and with extremism, fundamentalism, with ISIS, and with this ideology, ideologically, and in terms of the culture. Otherwise, it is not easy to defeat it, not in Iraq, but everywhere, because this is an international phenomenon. It is not related to Middle East only. Yes, the heartland of the fundamentalism and extremism is here in the Middle East, but at the same time now it become a universal phenomenon. Therefore, I think we should create different things, different culture, different attitude, and different tools, and how we recruit again culture as a means to create new atmosphere, new understanding, new mutual views over how we deal with this issue. Otherwise, it is not easy. The globalization, yes, create a small village, but in the same time, this small village is not safe. because in the same time, those groups use the globalization instruments like media, social media, like all the tools of the media to create problems not only in small village but everywhere. But therefore, the most complicated phase of the refugees and those people displaced is not only the militarily, or it is not only the way how we secure them, but we should secure them even ideologically and theoretically, because extremism and fundamentalism are not using only the militarily or fighting on the battleground, but even they use another tools. This is very important, and therefore we should, as a national community, we should do something different with the culture. Culture in this, in the classic way, not going to work with the extremism. We should go and create new views and new cultural world to do to make that our job is going.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of those practical ways that we can do that, because both of you are doing those kinds of things. Sherry, you've actually worked in the White House, and you've seen how limited some of the tools are of government in these things. And now here you are working at Sesame Street. And by the way, the work that Sesame Street is doing in this area, and that Sherry and her team have been doing, is being honored as one of our Cultural Diplomat Award winners in the ceremony we're doing tomorrow night, I guess. But talk a little bit about how something like Sesame Street, which we've seen earlier already gave us Noura Alkabi, is tackling the problem of refugees.
Well, you mentioned the numbers. I mean, there are 65 million displaced today, but half of whom are children, and some 12 million under the age of 8. So at Sesame, we know that reaching children in the early years is the most important thing in terms of giving a child the best chance for success. The other thing is that you know today through neuroscience, epigenetics, developmental psychology, that when a child is exposed to prolonged crisis situations, adverse childhood experiences, or what is called toxic stress, that actually can have such a long-term detriment, both in cognitive and physical ways over their lifetime. So at Sesame, we have a long history of sort of tackling issues often difficult through the lens of a child. And I was so pleased that Her Excellency Noura Alkabi mentioned Iftayah Simpson today, because I think you have to understand that if many people here think of Sesame Street as a U.S. iconic show, it's so much more, because I think where we're most impactful is where we go into countries, we create completely local adaptations, bringing together artists and educators to design programming that is designed to meet the needs of children in country, in their language, in their culture. Because we know children learn best when they see themselves in positive light, in context in which they can identify. So in the Syrian response region, what we're doing is creating content for those children. We'll be able to use media to reach children in host communities, radio, television, but also through partnering with the International Rescue Committee, we're creating content that will go into the camps to help those children with basic literacy and numeracy, but also promoting mutual respect and understanding, inclusion, acceptance. And the reason I mentioned the importance of engagement with an adult, like in order to overcome the detriments of toxic stress, the most important way to do that is through nurturing care. You have to involve the adult. And this is where people may not realize it, but we always work deliberately to engage adults as well as children. It's why Sesame includes musical artists, pop culture, parodies, humor, because when a parent is engaged as a child is enjoying Sesame Street, the learning is deeper. So this allows us actually to create content in a place like Zatri, I was just there a few weeks ago, that is designed for the child.
The refugee camp.
The refugee camp, sorry, in Jordan. But this content is designed for the child, but it also engages the adult, and we create strategies so that that content is actually a catalyst for adult-child engagement as well as a tool. And I think that's where we actually are having the most meaningful impact.
Well, I think that's an interesting point here because you're dealing with the psychological thing, you're dealing with developmental issues, but you're also dealing with the glue. Right. That in a situation where refugees find themselves displaced, it's dislocating. It pulls families apart. And if you can create ways to bring them back together, that has a social benefit. Now, you're an artist. You've also been dealing with this. Talk a little bit about how you have approached this problem.
Personally, I'm a hip-hop artist from Kenya, and I visited the camps in Kenya. We have two main camps. We are the biggest camp in East Africa, Kakuma and Dadaab. And when I visited the camp through UNHCR, because I work with them as the partners, I felt like something was missing, because as UNHCR and their policies, they don't do arts. They're all about protection of people and food and shelter. And camps in Africa or in Kenya are different, because people are not allowed to go outside the camps. You are like inside, so you can't do anything. You're not allowed to work as a refugee. And I felt like as an artist, what should I do, or what can I do to make the situation better? And I realized people always say they want to go to Africa, but Africa is not a country. If you want to go to Africa, go to a refugee camp. Then you go to Africa, because there's over like 9 different countries in one camp. And that's, for me, I've never been to like Africa. But when I went to the refugee camp, I felt like I was in every different country just off one block. You go, this is South Sudan, Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, and all this culture and art, and it was just there, and nothing was happening. And for them, this is their healing process. This is what they do when they're sad. This is what they do when they're happy. This is all they have. But I realized they could make a living from that. So we started a livelihood program in our collaboration with UNHCR to create a process where they can make music, they can make videos and sell them. They can perform when they perform, maybe in the camps when the UN has like their conferences and stuff. They can perform and get paid. So we started a thing called Refugenius. So Refugenius. Refugee itself is so negative in Africa right now. If you say you're a refugee, it's like you're a criminal. So we needed something positive on it. So we say, instead of saying I'm a refugee, say I'm a Refugenius. So it'll be more, people will be more interested. So what does that mean? Mean I can sing, mean I can dance, mean I can rap, mean I can play football. I'm a visual artist, and this made more people engage with refugees than way they were engaging with them before. And so yeah, this is what we do as a part of Octopizzo Foundation, and we are hoping to change more. And the problem is that every time you talk about refugees, people think like it's a crisis. It's not a crisis when people have lived in the camp for over 20 years. Yeah. It's not a crisis when some of them are born in the camps. They don't know where they come from. You just told you're South Sudanese, but you're born here, and he's like 15 years old. So there should be long-term policies to help these guys. And the only thing that you can do in this world without needing a paperwork is art. Because today you can be, today you might graduate in Kenya and you go to the States and your graduation is useless. But if you're rapping or singing in Kenya and you go to the States, you do the same thing in your vernacular language, nobody will ask you, where's your papers? So I feel the music and culture...
It almost never comes up at rap concerts, does it?
Yeah. So I feel music and culture is the only thing at the moment in the world that can change anything, because everything has failed. The governments have failed. I feel like United Nations has failed somehow, and all we have is artists and people who can talk and voice and do something. You don't have to, I don't believe in changing the world, but you can change, again, one person and it's a chain reaction. That person will change another guy, that guy will change another guy.
That's fantastic. When you hear this kind of a story, do you immediately think, I could apply this? We could do this kind of thing, dealing with the problems that we face in Iraq or elsewhere in the region?
Of course, we reached campus, peoples, we do activities there, and they react positively. At the same time, we do a lot of cooperation with international organizations, but still people in the campus and the places where located, they think that they should go back to their homes and they enjoy their life there because the culture and some activities that we doing there is limited because of our ability to reach campus sometimes, and is limited because of the lack of the money and even the rapid moves of the people around the area, and especially the new waves of the people were dislocated. For example, from Mosul. Now we are talking, and I know that the new wave get out from Mosul and estimate to be 25,000 people. And therefore, it is not easy. It is very complicated atmosphere. But at the same time, the culture is the only mutual thing that get people, even in the campus, and with the new environment in the new areas together. For example, the vast majority of the refugees and those people dislocated, they speak Arabic language, but now they're living in Kurdistan. And people in Kurdistan, they speak Kurdish language. But there is cultural bridges between them. Therefore, this is very important to get people together and to make them that they are in the safe and in one society and they can do things. But at the same time, maybe in Iraq things is totally different because of the tough battle growing now is going on, and the huge number of the casualties, and even sometimes the huge number of the people dying in the campus. But we try our best to create a new atmosphere for the campus, and especially for the children. We have specific organizations and body in the Ministry of Culture cooperating with not only with Iraqi artists, but even with UNESCO and with other organizations to make that the culture is still there, and the culture is the panacea for their painful and for their tough life in the campus. And I think that the most important thing, as I said, and I am going to repeat it again, we should defer the package of the military access and the package of the cultural things, because if we do it within one package, I think we cannot go forward. And now we are trying to differ, to distinguish between these two packages.
Okay, so I mean, that's an important distinction. And I think very often when we talk about problems like refugee problems, we think about them as problems.